Hello crafty friends, it's Jess from jesscrafts.com, and today I have a card that is featuring a stamp set from Mint Owl Studio. So I originally recorded all of this on Periscope, but I took the video, I sped it up, and I'm going to be doing a voiceover instead because I want you to just hear about how to make the card and not all of the comments and the extra sort of thing. But if you enjoy the live aspect of Periscope, please feel free to join us. I am scoping over at Jess Crafts. And so you can find me over on Periscope and follow me. I do scope a couple times a week. I try to do some card tutorials very similar to what I do on YouTube. And then I do some more that are kind of just chat based or experimental based. And so for today's card though, it is just a simple card tutorial. With the Periscope feature, I cannot zoom in as much as I ordinarily do, but I hope to be able to describe it well enough that you can understand what I'm doing, even though it is a little bit zoomed out. So I stamped this rainbow from the Mint Owl Studios stamp set, and Mint Owl Studios is a stamp company from Tracy at Tracy Made Designs. She's also on YouTube, and I'm sure many of you already subscribe to her channel. I really liked this stamp set, particularly because of the rainbow sentiments. I'm a big fan of rainbows, as many of you know, and so I wanted to have those rainbow stamps available in my collection for the sentiments, but I also thought that it would be fun to color in this rainbow image. However, with this particular rainbow image, there are only 3 stripes, and there are 6 colors in the rainbow. So what I decided to do was make each stripe 2 different colors from the rainbow. So still go in rainbow order, but blend my Copics from one color to another. This worked really well in the red to orange, where I used, I believe, an R46, then an R17 into the YR68. And because because red and orange do blend so easily into each other, it wasn't a big problem. Plus, I have a decent selection of red markers. However, when I went from the green to the yellow, I had a little bit more trouble just because I didn't have a really yellowy green in my collection. But I did Y18, YG13, and G14. And with enough working, I was able to get a blend. What I will note is that the thicker your cardstock, the better, because you're going to be laying on a lot of ink and you don't want a lot of bleeding, because then the colors will start muddying each other from one rainbow stripe to the next. So in this case, I am using the 110-pound cardstock available at Michael's from Recollections. And I find that thick enough for Copics. You do have to add more ink than you would to the 110-pound Georgia Pacific, but it also has less bleeding. So I know a lot of people feel like they can't blend on the Georgia Pacific, and I totally understand because it's a very thin cardstock, but it's what I practiced on when I first started, so I am able to get the blending on that, but it is much easier to work on a thicker cardstock. So if you're having trouble blending your Copics, that would be my first tip, is just try a couple different cardstocks, because that might be the issue, and you'll save yourself a lot of frustration if you just experiment and see what works for you personally. Also use a really light hand most of the time, because you can soak your paper quite quickly if you're pressing hard, and then you might get bleeding into areas you don't want, because the marker definitely gets in the paper and spreads a little bit. I almost never actually touch the lines when I color because I do not want the bleeding. So you have to kind of allow just a tiny bit of room for the color to spread. So if you color right along the black line, you might get some spreading outside of it. For the B's, I was able to do a pretty good job because I had some BV markers. So I used the B06, the BV, and a V marker. It was, I believe, the BV23 and then the V09. And as you can see, I do sometimes hold up what I'm working on to the camera because you cannot see as closely, and they're having a similar issue on Periscope because I do not have that zoom in feature. So hopefully that kind of gave you a little peek at what it really looks like blended out. But generally when you're trying to blend from one color to another in terms of being very different colors, you want to try to find that gap. So if you have the blue and the violet, there is that whole BV family. So find whatever you have in the BV family, maybe do that tip to tip technique to get a better blend, and you should be able to achieve it, especially in a small space like that, because then it's not going to be as startling of a contrast from one area to the next. So now I have laid a mask over my rainbow and cloud, and I'm going in with some tumbled glass distress ink. With this ink blending, I mentioned this on the one layer card that I did recently, you definitely want to start with as light of a hand as possible, because you can always layer in more ink, but you can't take ink away. So if you're having trouble getting that soft blend, that is my biggest tip. Like I said, I know I mentioned that recently, but I also know not everyone catches every video, so I do want to that's my biggest tip in terms of this ink blending technique. If you were to take your ink blending tool and start from somewhere in the middle of the card, you might get too much ink in one spot and you'll get that round impression of the tool. Instead, if you're trying to create a fade out from a focal image, make sure that you're always putting the ink from the pad right onto your masked area, because that's where you're going to want it to be darkest. Always start your ink blending tool in the area you want darkest and then move out. When you're working with the blending tool and you go to remove the foam after you're blending, you might have a little bit of ink left on your fingers, and that can spread to other areas of your card. So if you're doing a clean and simple card especially, my recommendation is to always check your fingers, see if you need to just kind of wipe them off on a damp cloth before you continue, because if you get a little blue splotch in the corner of a clean and simple card where you're really looking for white space, you might feel frustrated. However, you can always cover up things like that with a sequin or something like that. Now here, I did not get my blue all the way to the edge, and that's probably because I shifted my mask slightly, or when you are cutting out a mask, you're going to really want to cut a little bit into the black line. You don't want to cut on the very edge of the black line, because it's okay if there's a little bit of ink on the lines of the stamp. However, if you cut too far out, you're going to leave that white space. So what I'm doing here is just filling it in with my tumbled glass marker, because I happen to own the distress markers. Another option is you can take a Fantastic from Sukaneko, I believe, and you dab it in the distress ink that you used and just touch it to the area that is white. I have had a little bit less success with that version rather than using the distress marker, just because sometimes that lays on a really heavy color and is a little bit darker. But just kind of see what you can work with, maybe even just shift your mask over a little bit and you'll be able to get it there. Once I finish my ink blending, I wanted to add in my sentiment, so I'm going to stamp it in VersaFine ink. Sorry guys. I'm going to stamp it in VersaFine black ink and then clear emboss it. The reason that I'm choosing to do that is because I really wanted to stand out from the inked area. And the only issue here though is when you use distress ink, it takes a while to dry, as many of you know. And you actually can emboss with distress ink. So you could stamp something in distress ink and put clear embossing powder over it. And so I did not heat my panel first. I did not completely dry my ink with a heat tool, and in this case, and that was a mistake, because then I got a little bit of area where the distress ink held on to the embossing powder, and so you can't really notice it on the card if you don't do anything else. But I melted some of that embossing powder onto the blue area. So then when I went to stamp these solid hearts, I didn't get as great of an impression, because the areas that had a little bit of embossing powder stuck to them in the blue resisted my ink. I was, however, able to fix it by just taking a black Sharpie and filling in the area. So once I add a few more hearts, that's going to be it for this card today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Let me know if you'd like to see some voiceovers of my Periscope videos, and I can share those also with you guys here. Once again, these stamps are from Mint Owl Studio from Tracy May Designs, and I'll leave you a link to her shop and her YouTube channel so you can check it out. If you're interested in more crafting tutorials, including more zoomed in detailed videos, you can subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching. Bye.